Hi, very warm welcome. It's Gene from Avstar. Good morning. It's Saturday. Let's hope we can do a little bit better than what we have done over the last few days, guys. You know, I know that there's plenty of us here that can make a difference. What am I talking about? I'm talking about, our raised revenues for the last 3 days by the end of today, if nothing changes, will be 46 pence. Not even half of £1. So let's put some checkable, verifiable facts in this video. Let's improve the content a little bit and give you some information, and maybe it'll encourage you to chip in a few bucks. If not, what this video is that thing that encourages you, maybe the fact that we are giving you pretty much the majority of those people that really are suffering the effects of the financial climate right now and the economic downturn of the globe, free information on the magnetic pole migration, but you yourselves are getting that as well. So there is a link down there in the description. So starting off with a little thought experiment, an analogy, right? So if me and you go down to the local pond or lake or any still water, if the water's still, the better the effect. I'm talking about that ripple effect. And I take a stone in my hand and I throw it up in the air about 6 feet and it comes down plump into the water. It's guaranteed to produce those rings that form around it, those eccentric rings that spread out. Like if you cut an onion in half, there's those eccentric rings and the layers are on top of the other layers. Same thing with the pond. Now if I did that 50 times and the result was it produced ripples, would that be enough to convince you that this is a foregone conclusion, that by throwing pebbles into ponds or lakes produces those ripples? If it wasn't enough for you, and I'm sure you agree with me that it is going to produce the rings, if I give you the stones, 50 stones, and you threw them into the pond and it produced those ring effects, would it be enough to convince you at that point that when you repeat an experiment and you get the same outcome, that is a scientific proven fact? Now, just moving it from the concept of throwing a pebble into the water or the pond and taking this a little bit further, just so that I can broaden your horizon as to what is exactly happening right now. Not just with the magnetic poles reversing, because we've seen in the historical records at the spreading of the mid-Atlantic ridge underneath the Atlantic Ocean, the magnetite changes within the rocks, and we see that beyond 780,000 years there was a completed reversal, that on average that used to last every 300,000 years to 350,000 years, and it changed. So again, if I show you this evidence, I'm sure just like the pond ripple, you're going to say, Gene, I agree with you. And then if we take it a little step further and I say, look, here's the data that these organisations were collecting up until 2015. Then they stopped, and then they stopped releasing, not just as far as I'm aware, the information on the magnetic anomaly, but then they also classified the information on the effects that the magnetic anomaly was having on the climatic system, and it was found that it'd be better to possibly earn money out of CO2 rather than try and convince the people that the earth is going through a magnetic reversal, and therefore raise money and tax revenues that way, and also safeguard our infrastructure. Well, they went the other way on this, as you know. They went down the CO2 route, and therefore they don't really have to do anything, because they'll never improve or reduce the amount of CO2 in our atmosphere by any noticeable amount, because it's a trace gas anyhow, and whatever smidgen mankind puts up into the atmosphere in forms of CO2 is irrelevant and unnoticeable. Even if we stopped, it would be such a fraction of a fraction of a fraction. You'd get to the point, if we was looking at a pie chart, you wouldn't even notice that there was a line drawn with the fraction of the amount of CO2 that man puts into it. It would be ridiculous to try and find it. It would be worse than looking for a needle in a haystack. Nevertheless, the reason why I'm showing you this is not because of the magnetic pole reversal, because I think that is a foregone conclusion. This is happening, and the effects we've been talking about for the last decade now here at the observatory are real anomalies caused by that excursion or the magnetic pole reversal, whichever it turns out to be in the foreseeable future. And I'm not really talking about these ripples on the ponds either. It's just an analogy to set your mind up for what we're about to talk about next, because this is important and there is something you can do about it only if you choose to. But the point here is not for me to push you in the direction of action at this moment. I applaud you to act, but the point of doing this video is just to show you something else that is repetitive, and the outcome is just like the pond ripples, just like the magnetic reversal. It is repeatable, and the consequences are, repeatable, and the outcomes of those consequences are guaranteed to happen. So on the basis of that, let's show you what I'm talking about. So what I want to show you is what led to the Roman Empire and the economic decline of the Roman Empire. So there are three main categories. If you do a little bit of research and check on some historical facts, what you'll find is there was an overexpansion and military spending that led to severe financial strain. There was heavy taxation and inflation that led to weakening the economy, and the reliance on slave labour stifled innovation and economic mobility. So those are the three main categories. Now you might already have noticed, and I'm going to show you another chart in a bit, of where the current superpower is and the current empire is and its direction of travel. And I'm going to show you the emerging next empires, introduction to becoming the next empire. So you might have already noticed here, one of the things that led to the economic downcline of the Roman Empire was the overspending of the military financial assistance, let's say, and the outstretching of their soldiers. And there was a few other things as well. One of the things I remember in the history of the Roman Empire is that you didn't have to be a Roman to be a Roman soldier, and that demoralised the true Roman soldiers, and it made it less of a something to be proud of. Now when they was conquering other countries, they were employing people from those conquered countries to become Roman soldiers. So it just lost everything basically. And then we all know about the clipping of the gold coins, the gold Roman coins, as a taxation. And then that led to, the promise of what should have been perhaps, half-ounce gold coin, having all its sides clipped. It was no longer holding its value, and, it devalued the currency. And, we see these things repeating now, don't we? Just look at America right now and its massive military expenditure around the world, and its massive expanse of military bases all around the world. And how much America pumps into NATO compared to any other country, and how much America supports the funding of wars like Ukraine and Israel more than any other country. At the moment it's obvious. I don't need to show you the chart yet, but I want to show you where the chart's going. But that you would say that America is the current empire, but it is obvious to see that the things that led to the Roman Empire collapse and the British Empire are exactly the same things. Corruption, over expenditure, the reliance on slave labour. Look what's happening right now, a mirror image of these empires that have previously collapsed. Look what is happening today. The borders are open, the cheap labour's coming in, the overexpending on military power, the corruption within the government system, heavy taxations and inflation weakening the economies. it's easy to see that when you see these things taking place, what we're looking at is the repeated experiment we set out at the beginning of this video, throwing the pebble up in the air over the pond, watching it come down and going plump into the water, and those eccentric rings coming off. Every time we repeated that experiment, the same thing happened. Every time governments around the world neglected to learn from history and what led to empires collapsing, they themselves collapsed. So overexpending on military might, heavy taxation and the reliance on slave labour, and ignoring everything that's important about your empire and your your country and your surrounding countries, will lead to exactly the same as what has happened with the British Empire, with the Roman Empire, and of course the Egyptian Empire before that. We have hundreds of cases of the same things coming up at a particular point in time, the same behaviours causing the same outcomes. Now, let me show you where we are on the current empire and how the next empire is emerging. Just think about it, just have a little guess before I show you. Who do you think the next empire will be? Let me show you. So, before we begin, let me explain what is on this chart. So, where the arrows are pointing at the peaks and the troughs, at the point of where another country becomes a new world order, that is the point at where it starts to happen. But at the same time, the current empire, which is listed at the top, we've got the Netherlands, then we've got the United Kingdom that replaced the Netherlands as the new world order, and then we have the United States that replaced the UK as a new world order. And then in the red line on the bottom right hand part of this chart, we've got a very steep angle, not like the other angles, but a very steep angle, and that's China. So that's the chart. So we've got the empires at the top of the troughs or the peaks, and at the bottom we have the collapsing empires. And you can see the trajectory of the current empire, the United States, making its way down at around about the same pace. The Netherlands became the old world order, and the United Kingdom became the old world order, and inevitably at the rate at which China is becoming the new world order, I would even say at the moment it is at the point where it surpasses the cross lines of the old orders already because of its trajectory, and is about to put America as the old world order, and what will become the new world order will inevitably be China, because its position currently. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people that disagree with this, but this is history. We're not looking at the rings on a pond, but what we are looking at is historical facts that led to specific outcomes. And one thing that is clear about all these old world orders is that they collapsed in the exact same manner as the previous one, and then the previous one to that, and then the previous one to that. So we've got these three at the top currently: the United States, the United Kingdom, then before the United Kingdom it was the Netherlands, and then you would have probably had the Roman Empire, and before the Roman Empire the Egyptian Empire, and it goes back all the way through our history. This is what takes place, and as a result of the same products, or the same corruptive behaviour, or the same reasons, whichever you want to call it, it will lead to the same outcomes of what we've witnessed already, which is terrible, because we know, don't we, just like looking through a crystal ball now, where we sit. Now, when the British Empire collapsed, it didn't mean that it totally dismantled itself. We have seen that in our history when empires have collapsed, a total dismantle, and we've had a new trick in our sleeve, up our sleeve, so to speak, and that's the reprinting of money and borrowing at a rate like unseen before in previous empires. Now, when we go back to the Roman Empire, the currency back then was mainly shekels of gold and silver. You know, and you couldn't reprint that. You had to resource that. It was a real currency. And if you run out of gold, then, and you know, as a result of that, your economy would collapse, and so would your empire. So through the overexpending of the Roman Empire, you know, they had used up all their gold, and they became bankrupt, and therefore, you know, over a period of time, dissolved. And we've managed to avoid that at this present time by printing up fiat currency, and therefore avoided the initial impacts of a collapse. But this cannot continue. You know, what you are doing is what the Romans did before, when you are allowing just anybody into your country. The fact of being something special, like an American would be proud to be American, and, you know, talk about the American dream and the land of opportunities. You know, how many opportunities and how many dreams, if not nightmares, are Americans having right now with the cost of living crisis? And what brought about the cost of living crisis? The inability to get labour, exchange your labour for a reasonable, livable wage. And that came about through the opening up of borders, because at the end they could print up as much money as they wanted, but they couldn't convince the individual to work for nothing or pretty much as a slave. Now, if you look up the definition of a slave is somebody that is sheltered, clothed and fed. Now, if at the end of your working month and you pay all your bills on a roof over your head, food in your cupboard and some clothes on your back, and you have nothing less, then you're no better off than a slave. Think about that. You're no better off than a slave. And now I would argue that some people are struggling to even meet the roof over their head, put food on the table, and at the same time buy themselves some new threads of clothes at this very point in time. Yet there are some of those people out there that are working 2 if not 3 jobs. This is a failing system, but just for another reason. And I just wanted to bring that to your attention, because that gives you an idea of the severity of the times that we are in right now. And, you know, the mentality has been allowed, it's been preserved by the printing up of cash, but the behaviour has got much worse. You know, if we look at President Zelensky in the Ukraine right now, that guy is responsible for hundreds of thousands of his citizens' deaths. That the reason why that happened, and he allowed it to happen, is because he's such a miserable negotiator. Because he listened to Boris Johnson and thought he could take on one of the world's biggest armies, you know, with over 100 million population compared to less than 10 million population, I believe. I'm not sure of the demographics of the Ukraine. It might be more than that. I don't know. I've never looked into it, but I doubt they've got a matching population size of Russia. So the ability for Russia to draw up more troops through conscription far outweighs the ability for Ukraine to do and compete at that level, despite the West sending, you know, ATACMS missiles, Abraham tanks and everything else, and despite us sending up printed money which should have been spent on its own citizens, not being given to another country so that it could depopulate its people. Pointless lives lost through what is a comedian. Zelensky is a comedian. He's famous for playing the piano with his dick. You know, why would you ever think that a man like that calibre could ever run a country, let alone negotiate the safety of his country's people? This war could have been averted. Instead of, now we are 3 years into it, and the whole world, or NATO, is paying heavily for it. And in my view, that's illegal to use public revenues in such a manner, because they do have a duty to spend that money in a more appropriate way. Now, when you take in the gas allowances off pensioners and giving the money away to the Ukraine and Israel to fight their wars, then I put it to you that, you are nothing short of a criminal and should be put behind bars. Not just for supporting genocide, aiding and abetting in murder on a grand scale. I put it to you that you are a threat to humanity itself. Not only have you betrayed your country, your flag, your people, and, your dignity, you've managed to kill hundreds of thousands in the meanwhile. And what they think is their conscience is clear as soon as they leave the job, like David Cameron, Richie Sunak and Boris Johnson. They think that their conscience is clean, and before them, what was his name? Tony Blair, because he was responsible for the Iraq War, which cost, men and women and children in the hundreds of thousands of lives lost. He was responsible for that. The point of doing a video like this is to open your mind, show you that there are repetitive products that give, the same outcome every time. If you put the same products in, you get the same products back out. And it's to show you that you can apply this principle to a lot of things in your life. And that maybe, just maybe, it might be enough for you to stop, take a look around, make a plan, and execute the plan for the better of your future and your family and loved ones' future. That's what this video is about. So, having said that, hopefully there has been some food for thought. I would love to know what your points of view are. Put them in the comments. Share your points of view on this and with other people. And there's a link down there in the description if you want to help support us. Let's see if we can raise a little bit more than 46p, guys. Come on. This is the third day. It'd be disappointing if the end of the day comes and all this we've done in 3 days is 46 pence. I'm sure we can do better. In fact, I know we can. Link down there. Catch you in a few days when we do the magnetic pole reversal positioning. As always, bye for now.